Hello, my name is Hudson Cuno, and I did my plan project on the Reno Creek project, which I will tell you about in a little bit. So, some basic information about this project is that it's located in Campbell County, Wyoming, which let me go all the way to the top again. Shows this little map right here, right on the first page of the plan of where exactly the project site is located. The company that this work was done for was AUC, which I don't know much about it. I just found this plan on the internet. And from what I could gather, it has something to do with uranium processing, I believe. Don't quote me on that. That's all I could find. And this is a plan from 2012. So, what is going to be constructed? So, the main thing that they're constructing is this processing plant right here. I don't know exactly what it's going to be used for. The plan never states that anywhere from what I could find. Um, but it's this main processing plant, as well as there's going to be a connected office and shop, which is shown right here. That'll be north of the processing plant, and then even more north of the office and shop is the parking area, which I believe will be for the employees. Um, yeah, and then the last thing that will be constructed is this backup pond over there to the west of the processing plant. I'm not sure what the backup pond is going to be used for, but it's there. So, some items of interest that I found interesting on this plan is that on sheet C1.1, or on page 4, there's a demolition sheet. Let me just scroll down to it. Because there are some pre existing buildings where they want to build that. And so this just shows there's an existing road right here that follows down to these buildings, but they don't want the buildings there. So they want to build their uranium processing plant. And also, they're going to be removing the fence as well as cattle guards. So I'm guessing livestock was here if they have to remove cattle guards, as well as this existing fence out here. Um, yeah. And then another thing that I found interesting is that on sheet C2.3, or page 8, it has the truck routing. So which page? Page 8. Let me scroll down to that. Okay. So it shows the exact routing as well as the location of the roads and how long they are, and where they are in comparison to the processing plant. So that was pretty easy to find. I like how they have the routing because it just makes it a lot easier for the trucks to go through. So, some things that I really liked about this plan is that the building locations, which if we go back up to the top, they are very clearly marked with what they are, and it's not hard to read it at all. And even for like the processing plant, it shows you how big it is. So I really like that, as well as this big area down there. It tells you that it's 1.5 acres, which is really quite useful. Um, Another thing that I liked is that that map that I showed you at the very beginning, this map over here of Wyoming, Shows you exactly, because I don't know Wyoming very well because I live in Idaho. But it shows you a pretty good idea of where exactly this is located. One of the other things that I liked about this plan was its sheet index, which I used a lot. It was very helpful. It's probably like the best thing on this plan was the sheet index. It's because all you had to do is come over to the sheet index on the first page, and it tells you what every sheet in this set uh, had, what information it had. Like that's how I was able to find the demolition plans, which I thought was interesting. The truck routing, which it just kind of points out some of the detailed parts, and even some of like the only thing that maybe I wouldn't like is that site details. It's not very. That's kind of vague on its wording, like what kind of site details for what part of the construction. So some things I didn't like was that it didn't give you much of an idea of what was actually being constructed besides like processing plant. Like, yeah, it's processing plant, but what is it processing? Like, I had to do a little bit of research, and the closest I could get was by looking up this guy's name, the owner's name. All I could find was that he had something to do with uranium energy. So I don't know if it's something to do with nuclear, or I don't know, because it says how his most recent working experience was working at AUC LLC and was integral to the successful permitting of the Reno Creek ISR project. Here in a Bachelor of Science, yeah, yada, yada, yada. But it doesn't tell you what he did to do that. And nowhere on the plans does it actually say what they're building. Like I get like kind of like the generic name like office and shop because those are a little bit self-explanatory, but processing plant I wish they would have gone into a little bit more detail. And then another thing I didn't like, which was really annoying, was that the notes were in a very small uh, font, and they could have been definitely couldn't have been scaled up. Like one of the examples I really saw was on page 5. These notes over here, they're so small. And when you're zoomed out, it's a lot more noticeable. When you're actually zoomed out here, you can barely read them. You have to zoom in really close when they could have just taken it and expanded it a lot. They had a lot of area to work with. Like on some of these sheets, they didn't have much area to work with, like on this one. To get why it should be small on that one. But a lot of them, like this one, it still has a lot of area that they could have done notes. Or they could have increased the font. Could have expanded that one. Could have expanded that one. Yeah, and so on. Because a lot of the sheets, just the notes were way too small to read, especially down here. They're unreadable. Like the font doesn't actually, you can't read it. So, my overall thoughts on this plan was that it was very well organized, which was help to the sheet index. If it wouldn't have had this index, it would have just felt like random pages. It would have been sifting through nonsense. But with the sheet index, you can look at what you will kind of know what's going on and seeing. So that made it a lot more like friendly to read. If it didn't have that, it would be really hard to read. Another thing is it's very easy to read. Like there are no spots where it's kind of like you have font like lettering on top of each other. Even in here where they have like this hatch from the CAD, they widened it out so that you can actually read the text. Lots of things I've seen have just never. They would just keep the hatch over it, so you couldn't read the text, or they'd bring it out way here, and you could barely see the arrows. So I thought the actual drawings themselves were very well done. They're very nice, and Also, it's helpful that they just gave you a whole page that you could probably, if you actually had this printed out, you could put it off to the side and just have a legend on what is for your legend and just reference that if you don't know what a symbol means. And another thing was that they could have gone into more detail again on what was actually being constructed, because it was very difficult for me to find out what they're actually doing. And one last thing was this truck routing plan. Now, the summer I worked at a job where they had a very poor layout on how the trucks came through, and it was a mess. Like, one of my jobs was to drive out to the truck drivers and just show them where to go, which should never be the case. You should be able to, as a truck driver, you should be able to pull in, get your load, or do whatever you need to do and get out. And just having it, if this was like a jumbled mess, which this is a very easy layout to not mess up on, but where I worked, it was terrible because you'd have truck drivers that would pull into, like, you'd have one truck driver pull in this way, one pull in this way, and then they'd like kind of have to back out and have a tough time, especially once they're fully loaded. That would have sucked. But that took a lot of time out of my job when I could have been unloading the train cars, because that was a totally separate part. I wasn't even part of the trucks. I was unloading train cars. So that's basically all I have to say about this plan. Overall, it was a very good plan. Yeah. Thank you.